Hi and welcome to today's tutorial. Today we're filming the Audrey. Now the Audrey is a pattern that I released 2 years ago, and I have so many people go to my website and say, oh my goodness, I didn't realise that you had created this pattern. It's amazing and I love it. The original video is still on my YouTube channel, so you can pop over and watch that one, but I thought it's been 2 years, it's my birthday, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to re-release it. So here it is, the re-released version of the Audrey. So you're asking why you're re-releasing it? Well, firstly, because as I say, it's 2 years old. It probably could do with a bit of an updated video to go along with the pattern. But as well as that, there were always some little things that as I went on my pattern creating journey, thought, do you know, really I could have changed this, I could have added this might have been nice. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to add those to a new video. So the original pattern is the same. So if you already have the Audrey pattern, nothing has changed. Everything that you have in your pattern instructions and in your pattern pieces is exactly the same. I've just utilised them in a slightly different way. So the original Audrey, you can see behind, this was one of the first ones that I ever made, and I do still have it and I do still love it. So with the original Audrey, you have a choice. You can do your strap tabs up here by the zip, or if you prefer, you can do the hidden strap connectors, whichever you are most comfortable with. Both of those are in the pattern instructions. So on the front, we've got this lovely feature pocket. Now you can do what I've done, where you can use a panel, which looks amazing on the front, or alternatively, you can leave it and do some sort of embroidery, entirely up to you. The back panel on the original pattern has been left blank. So again, perfect for some embroidery. Or if you didn't want to, you don't have to include that front pocket, and you could put the embroidery on the front. It's entirely up to you. For this one here, you can see I've also made a crossbody strap. There are no extra rectangle rings or anything for that. I've just attached one this side, and made a standard length crossbody. Now, this particular bag is one that I love taking to the city with me when I go. I did go to the city for my birthday last week. And this is the bag that I took. It actually still has all my things in it because I didn't empty it before I filmed this. And it's great for taking to the city if you want a crossbody. As you can see, it's slightly larger than the average crossbody. It's sort of tote bag size actually. But what I like about it most is because of the angular shape, at the top it's slightly narrower, but it widens out at the bottom, which means actually you can get so much in it. I mean, in this bag at the moment, I have glasses and tissues and passport and purse and just everything thrown in there. And I mean, it's amazing. It just fits everything. But I like it because I like to use a crossbody bag. But it does mean that because it's narrower at the top, for anybody trying to get into it, my hand is usually here, the zip's not going to open, and it is a little bit more awkward for somebody else to put their hand in, although for you, carrying it, it's really, really easy. Inside the Audrey is a zipped pocket, and inside that zip pocket, there are some card slots. So you've got a choice with the new add-on ideas of doing the card slots slightly differently, which I will show you in the upcoming video. But the other thing that I have included, and I'll show you this one, this is my new Audrey. Now, they are exactly the same size. There's no difference. This one has two-tone straps, and I will show you how to do those. Obviously, I've used rivets. You don't have to use rivets. If you're a beginner sewist, this is a beginner pattern. So you do have a zip on the top, but this zip is done exactly the same way as you would do a zip in a pouch. So if you're used to creating pouches and you've ventured into doing zips for that, this bag will be your next step. Let's have a look. Oh, let's start with the front. On the front, obviously, we've got our feature pocket, which has that nice angle to it. It's a slip pocket. If you wanted to, you could add a magnetic snap on there. I haven't, but you could do that quite easily. The first add-on that we've added to this pattern is what I'm calling a hidden slip pocket. Now, I had a little bit, well, I don't know, I was having a bad day. And I created the pocket, and then I had forgotten, I had problems with my filming anyway. So actually this is a little lower than it should be. This should actually be up here, and so it would be a hidden slip pocket, but mine's not a hidden slip pocket because I had some problems, nothing to do with the pattern, all to do with technology. But it is a slip pocket, which is perfect for putting some extra things in. Again, if you're in the city, your bag is next to your body, you could slip your phone in there if you wanted to. Let's have a look inside. So inside this one, okay, it's not very clear. Why did I do black on the inside? Licorice all sorts. Do you like licorice all sorts? In here, I don't know if you can see, is our zip pocket. Let me just open that. And inside the slip pocket, inside the zip pocket, you will find your card slots. Okay, now for this particular one, in the front, you've got the front of your pocket, which means your mobile phone can go in there, your keys can go in there, whatever. Then you've got your card slots, and then behind that, there's space for a pencil or a pen, or maybe if you've got more slimline glasses, those will fit in there perfectly. Otherwise, you can do the original way that the pattern was done. Open this one, open the zip. Oh, it's got paper in it. I forgot to take that out. Never mind. It's okay. Inside this one, you'll see. So we've got the space in the front, but also, I can find it, wrong angle. There's a space behind as well. So if you want to put your mobile phone in, you can put your mobile phone behind your card slots, and then you could maybe put your keys in front of your card slots. So there are options within this video to change the original pattern just a little. I think that's everything. I don't know. There might be some other things that appear throughout the video. If there are, enjoy. I really hope you like creating this pattern. I had so much fun designing it. I've really enjoyed refilming the video. It is one of my favourite bags. I love it so much. I can't say anything else about it. So if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any other videos. So for now, let's refilm this Audrey bag. So starting off, we're going to take one of our outer pattern piece 1 and the pattern piece 1 lining. This is for the hidden pocket on the back. Now, you'll notice this is a little bit shorter, so I've actually cut 6 centimeters off of the bottom of the outer and lining of the hidden pocket only, not of the main bag pattern piece 1. Those two pieces are set aside. This is only for the hidden pocket. So pattern piece 1, hidden pocket, outer lining, 1 outer, 1 lining, 6 centimeters off the bottom of both. Now you'll see that I've got some stitch marks here. That's because I've already done this once, and as always I didn't film properly. I lost the video. It's a long story. If you've been watching my Instagram and that, you will have seen it, but we're going to sew it again. It'll be fine. So outer lining, 1 of each, 6 centimeters off the bottom of both. Let's put these right sides together. Excuse all the little bit of fluff from the unpicking. So put those right sides together, and I'm going to stitch across the top and the bottom edges with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Because I've already done this and I've already trimmed down the seam allowances because I've filmed this once already, I'm going to do mine at a 1/2 centimeter, which is about 1/4 of an inch. But if you're doing this for the first time, you haven't made the mistakes that I made, you're going to do yours at a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's top and bottom, not the sides. Okay, so let's trim threads. Now you're going to trim your seam allowances here down by half, so to about 1/4 inch, 5 or 6 millimeters. Obviously mine's already done because I had already cut it. Trim up any extra threads. There we are, and we're going to turn this through. There we go. So I'm going to roll the seam back. If you're using something like quilting cotton, obviously you can iron your seams. Because I'm using cork and quilting cotton, it's really a little bit easier to roll it. If you're using something like vinyl, you will need to roll it. Okay. Now I'm going to clip that in place. And then I'm going to stitch across the top here, just top stitch across with a 3.5 millimeter stitch length, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and that will keep that in place. For the bottom part, it's your choice. You can top stitch across this bottom edge now if you would like, or you can wait until we attach it to the main pattern piece 1 outer panel. I'm going to top stitch across the bottom part of mine now, and then I'm going to go over it again when I attach it, just because, as you can see, this cork is quite bouncy and it makes it a little bit easier to control at the sewing machine if we top stitch it twice. There we are, finished, back and front. So bringing in one of our pattern piece 1, this is the one for the back panel. I'm going to measure up a distance from the bottom edge, and I'm going to make a mark on both sides. That distance can be found in your pattern instructions. It is the same measurement as we will be using for the front pocket, which can be found on page 5, step 17. Okay, so you'll be able to find the measurement there. There we are, I've just made 2 marks, one either side. I'm going to take my hidden pocket panel and I'm going to line up the bottom edge with the marks that I've just made. I'm also going to center it. Now, because I have already done this, as before, this has already been trimmed. So your pattern piece should match up with the edges. Obviously mine is a little bit short, so I'm going to just center mine, which I think is okay. And we'll clip that in place. Starting in this top corner, we're going to backstitch really well. So down the side, across the bottom, over the top of the top stitching, if you've done that already. If you haven't done that already, then make sure that your pocket's really nice and flat. You come across the bottom and back up the other side, back stitching really well when you get to the end. And then when I've done that, I'm going to stitch another row across the bottom edge, 1 centimeter in from the bottom, just for decorative purposes and to also give it a little bit more support. Also just noticed that I should have done a second row of stitching across the top here. So before I sew this on, I'm actually going to go and do another row of stitching across the top just for decorative purposes. If you don't want to do it, you absolutely don't have to, but then I like doing that because then it mirrors top and bottom. So I'm actually going to unclip this first, stitch that one, clip it back together. So 1, 2, 3 sides, and then stitch that second row. There we go, so that's our pocket. I've stitched across here. Remember, I took this off of here to do that second row of stitching, then clipped it back on. So don't try and stitch it while it's on here, otherwise you'll stitch your pocket closed. So now we're going to bring in our pattern piece 2. So I've got 1 for each direction. I'll take the first one and I'm going to lay them right sides together, lining up this top corner and right the way along the edge and this bottom corner. Now when you line them up, you will notice that this angle's down here And also this angles down here and comes off the end. That is correct. Okay, so long as we match up the corners and match up this side here. And do the same on the other side. So right sides together, matching up at the corner and clipping all the way along. I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew down each side with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when I've done that, I'm going to do a second row of stitching, just 1 or 2 millimetres, a 1/16 of an inch inside the seam allowance, just to double stitch the seams so as we don't have any problems with stitches pulling or being able to see stitches when we've finished. I've double stitched these seams and I've back stitched really well the pockets, sorry, where the pocket is, just to give it some extra support. And now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim down my seam allowance by half. Obviously my pocket was already trimmed, but my back panel and side panels aren't. So there we go, I've already done this side. So now I'm going to fold back the outer or the side panels like this, and you'll notice that naturally this seam wants to go behind this side panel. That's correct. So I'm going to fold that back and then I'm going to top stitch down this edge here with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. I'm going to do that on both sides. There we are, so that's top stitched down both sides. Now we're going to bring in one of our pattern piece 3. So we've got short edge, longer edge. I'm going to find the midpoint of the bottom and top of our pattern piece 3. Just take some scissors, just take a tiny little snip. Do the same at the top. And we don't need this at the top yet, but we will need it soon, so we might as well do it now. Go. I'm going to find the midpoint of the top of our front panel. Now I'm lining up these seams here, so not the edges. If we look, my edges are ever so slightly out, so it's actually important to line up the seams rather than the edges, because obviously we want this to be centered. Again, tiny little snip at the bottom, lining up the seams. Tiny little snip. There we are. So, short edge, long edge. I'm going to flip these right sides together, so I'm going to flip my pattern piece 3 down, fluff, and I'm going to line up those 2 center points and clip that in place. Okay, then I'm going to clip all the way along. Now you'll notice that my pattern piece 3 overhangs the pattern piece underneath. That's absolutely correct. It should overhang slightly at the bottom. When we flip up, that shouldn't be a problem. It should all come together. So now I'm going to take this across the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch across the top edge with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3 millimeter stitch length. And again, the same as we did with the sides, I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching, a second one, 1/16 of an inch, 1 or 2 millimeters inside the seam allowance, just to stop those stitches from pulling. that's stitched into place. You see I've double stitched it, and again I back stitched where these seams are just to make sure they don't come undone. So again I'm going to trim down the seam allowance just by about half. I'm going to fold this up into place, and as before this naturally wants to fall behind the upper flap, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. Top stitch across this top edge with an 1/8 of an inch or 3mm seam allowance and a 3.5mm stitch length. There we are, so that's top stitched in place. Now I've just realised I've made a little bit of a mistake, because I was looking at this thinking, well, why have I got this gap? But of course I've got this gap because I had trimmed down my seam allowances on my pocket piece, and so now I have lined up with the lines when actually I should have been further up. So this actually should be a little closer to this edge here. That's what you should have. If yours looks like mine, it doesn't matter, it's absolutely fine, it still looks brilliant. But it should be 1/4 of an inch, it should be further up. Never mind, it's fine, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you'll see we've still got these little ears here, these little corners, so we're just going to cut those off. Make that nice and even, and at the bottom, I'm slightly out at the bottom as well, so I'm just going to trim that up. Just make it a little bit easier later on. It's only a tiny little bit, it's absolutely fine. There we go. So that is the back panel. And what we're going to do is exactly the same thing with the front panel and the front pocket. So here's my front panel that I've done. I've sewn it in exactly the same way. Obviously I haven't cut anything off of my pattern piece 5. So obviously this is pattern piece 5 outer and lining, as it is in the pattern instructions, but measured up, sewn into place, side pieces put on, then the top, exactly the same as we did before. This is pattern piece 6, and on pattern piece 6 you will find some measurements, some points to mark down each side. Those are on the actual pattern piece, or if you're not printing the pattern pieces, or all of the pattern pieces, this one, the measurements for this are in the pattern instructions. So I have made some marks already. I don't know if you can see them, so I'm going to try and do it again just with my pink chalk. Hopefully you can see those. So we've got A, B, C, D, E. Same on the other side, A, B, C, D, and E. Now this is the top. We look at it this way. So if you have a directional fabric, you need to make sure that this is the top and this is the bottom. Okay, so A is at the bottom, E is at the top at the moment. If you're not using a directional fabric, which I'm not, you need to be really, really careful that you make sure this is round the right way. We don't want to make this the top and this the bottom because of our measurements that are in place. So starting with our A, which is here, I'm going to turn it wrong side up, and I'm going to fold wrong sides together until I get to my 2 points for A, lining up the edges, folding at my A point. I'm just going to finger press that for the moment. If you want, you can iron this into place now. It's absolutely fine. I'm going to iron mine in a minute when I've done it. So I'm just going to press that into place. I'm going to turn it over, flip up my A, and I'm going to line it up with B. Okay, so there's my B points, and I'm lining up that line from A with B. Okay, again, making sure that sides are lined up. Just going to finger press that into place. And also creasing here underneath. There we go. Again, I'm going to flip over this back, and I'm going to fold at C. Okay, so sort of like we did with A. This time we're folding at C. Again, making sure that our sides are lined up. Folding at C. Finger press. I like to do it like this rather than ironing straight away, because sometimes if my cutting's not right, or maybe I've been a bit wibbly wobbly with my measuring, if I finger press it first, I can always adjust it later. So flip over. Now I'm lining up C with the lines at D. Again, making sure the sides are lined up. Finger press. Press this seam that's underneath as well. Okay. Turning over. We're going to line up our lines from E, and you'll notice that then the bottom of this should line up with the bottom underneath. Okay. Lining up the sides, making sure everything's neat and tidy. This is a little bit off, it's okay. Okay. And finger press down. So I'm going to take this to the iron and press it in place just to say that I did. And then I'm going to top stitch across each of these 3 creases. So I'm going to top stitch this one first, then I'm going to flip it out of the way and top stitch the second one. Then I'm going to flip that one out of the way and top stitch the last one. Make sure you flip them out of the way, because if you start top stitching down here, you won't be able to get into your pockets. There we are. And I'm going to stitch that with a 3.5mm stitch length, 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge. There we are. So that is 1, 2, 3. If we look, they all come apart. They're not stitched together. I just top stitched across the edge. Bringing in pattern piece 11, and I'm going to line up the bottom edge of my card slots with the bottom edge of the pattern piece 11. Now you need to make sure you've got this up the right way. This is not a square, it is a rectangle, so make sure it's the right way around. There we are. Make sure it's nice and neat. Okay. And I'm going to take this across the sewing machine and I'm going to baste this into place around those 3 edges. There we are. So that's just basted in place just to hold it. In the pattern instructions on page 7, you will find the measurements for the card slots. So I'm going to mark those now. There we are. I hope you can see those. So I've got my first 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you'll notice that the space on this side is wider than the space on this side. So the right side is wider than the left. The reason for that is we'll be opening our zip from left to right. That means that when your zip pocket is open to get into your card slots, your zipper pull is going to sit here. If we make this the same size as this, your zipper pull will be further over and you'll struggle to get your cards in and out of this last card slot. So we do have an extra little bit of space on this side for that reason. It's for when your zipper pull is open and in the way. If you wanted your zip to open from right to left, all you would need to do is reverse your measurements. So the first measurement, which we've got on this left side, you would do on the right and then follow it through. So then this last one would be wider on the left side rather than the right side. So when you open your zip pull this way, it will have the space there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine. I'm going to turn it upside down. And I'm actually going to sew from the bottom up. Now the reason I'm doing that is if I sew down, sometimes it snags and can cause it to get a little bit creased, whereas if I sew from the bottom up, it keeps it nice and flat for me. So I'm going to stitch each of these 4 lines with a 3.5mm stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch really well at each of these card slot points, because when we put our cards in and out, these points here will be under quite a bit of stress. There we are, that's all stitched in place. Trimmed up the threads, grab some cards. Just going to double check that my card slots work. It's really important that you do this now, because you don't want to get to the end and find that your cards don't fit. So those are all absolutely fine. Just check these as well. So we've got some extra slots here compared with the original pattern. So here is the original. They look the same, I know. This is the original pattern, and what we've done is we've sewn all these card slot pieces before adding the backing on. So depending on if you want extra card slots, bearing in mind they're quite deep, you could use them to add pens or, I don't know, a ruler or something else. It's quite handy to have a slightly deeper pocket there. If you've got thinner glasses, they will fit in there. Or alternatively, you can sew together the card slots, then baste them onto the backing if you wanted the original pocket that goes behind. Either way, both work. In front of these, you will have an extra slip pocket anyway. So it's just the choice of, do you want the 2 slip pockets or extra slots here, for example, for your pencil or your pen, something like that. So you can make your choice from there. Starting the inside zip pocket. So I've got one of my pattern piece 4. This has been interfaced with the medium weight non-fusible interfacing. And the first thing I'm going to do, this one is for the back panel of the lining. So if you've got a preference for your front and back, this will be the back panel of the lining, pattern piece 4. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the midpoint top and bottom. So I'm just going to fold in half, fold in half there, and crease that down, and then I'm just going to take a little piece out of the top, just make sure that's still lined up. Take my scissors, snip, same here, snip that, just a tiny little piece, so when we open out we've got the bottom and top marked. Now I'm going to measure down a distance from this top edge and make a mark. And there we go. So that's the mark there. I'm hoping you can see it. I'm trying to do it in white, but obviously, you know, there's quite a bit of white there, so I'm hoping you can see that. The next thing I'm going to do is take my other pocket lining piece. So this is the pattern piece 11, the one without the card slots, okay? So this is the other one. And again, I'm going to find the midpoint top and bottom. Make sure you've got it round the right way. Remember, this is not a square, it's a rectangle. Don't want to be marking the wrong way round. And I'm going to line up that centre point with the mark that I've made there, and just make sure that that's straight. And if you want, you can take a ruler and just measure, make sure that's in place. And we'll pin that in place there. Okay, so next I'm going to measure down a distance from the center point and make a mark. And then I'm going to measure in from both sides and I'm going to draw a line across. All of these measurements can be found in your pattern instructions. There we go, I hope you can see that. So I've measured down from that center point, measured in, made 2 points, obviously same distance down, and draw a line across. Now, using my ruler, I'm going to measure down 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. Make a little point there. Same on the other side, and then I'm going to join that up. So there's my box ready for the zip. Now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch the box that I've just marked using a 2.5mm stitch length. So there's the box stitched. You can see it a little bit more clearly maybe from the back. Now, we're going to draw a line down the centre and a small triangle at either end. I'm taking my scissors, I'm going to fold this in half. Now you can do this with a craft knife if you want. You need to be quite careful. We're going to cut along that centre line. So I'm just going to make a small snip first so as I can get my scissors in. I'm going to cut along this line that I've drawn. We're going through all layers, right the way through. Swap scissors. I want to get into the corner here. So we need to get as close to our stitches as possible, but not actually cut the stitches. Okay, so we need to get really, really close. The closer we get, the better the corners will be when we turn through. Now we're going to push this through. If you want, you can take this across to the iron and iron flat along each of the stitch lines. And for me, I find that makes the corners much neater and much easier to push through. Okay, so let's pull all that through. Turn over. Okay, first things first, let's unpick this. So I've pushed it back through. So obviously it's upside down. I'm just going to unpick all of this. Okay, so what we should have done is have this panel right side up and this one right side down. So now, because we've already cut the hole, we have to be super duper careful in lining this up. So I'm just going to check that is lined up and that is lined up, and I'm going to pin it in place. The fiddliest bit of this is the lining up. Now, because we've ironed it, it actually is sitting together quite nicely. So I think we're going to be okay. Right, so now I'm going to go round and I'm going to stitch over this crease. Now it is slightly raised, but that's okay. That should help me to follow it. So I just need to follow this all the way around and stitch in exactly the same place as we did before. Turn this through. Now this is all nice and neat. Turn this through. Fold all that in. Obviously we've already cut everything, so we should be okay. We'll double check everything's sewn correctly. I'm going to take the iron and press that into place. And there we are. So that's nice and neat and the right way around. Next, we're going to add our zip. So if you remember back when we made our card slots, we made our card slots with one side wider than the other to allow for our zipper pull when it's open. So we need to make sure that this zip is on the left when open and on the right, sorry, other way around, on the left when closed and on the right when open. That means if I turn this over, it needs to be this way. Okay, so left when closed, right when open. Bring this over, that means it needs to go this way. I'm going to lay it right side down. I'm just going to post my zipper pull through there. Now, normally I would use double-sided tape and just put a little bit of tape onto my zip. However, as always, my double-sided tape seems to have rolled off somewhere, so I'm going to use this. It's a sew line glue and it works brilliantly for adding zips. I'm just going to put a little bit here and here. It's just going to help hold that zip in place lightly. I'll still be able to peel it off if I need to reposition, but it just helped to stick it a little. So let's make sure we get this right way around. Other way, that way. Okay, so let's post this through. And I'm going to try and line up my zip the edge of the pocket. Let's turn it over. And this can be a little bit fiddly. Just take your time. It's really important to make sure that this is all lined up correctly. And you've got your zip in place. You're just going to press down, whether you've used double-sided tape or the glue. Press down just to hold it. Take a quick look behind, just make sure that everything seems okay there. Okay, now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch a box around the edge, 1/8 of an inch, 2 or 3 millimeters from the edge, and I'm going to use a 3 millimeter stitch length because at the moment I'm using a cotton woven, a quilting cotton, so the stitch length can be a little bit less than when I'm using the cork. So just a box all the way around, and I'm going to leave the tails longer so as I can pull them through to the back, tie them in a knot, and it leaves this looking a little bit neater. There we are. So left closed, right open. Oh. In the back. That's okay. Now I'm going to put my zip pull in the middle so as I know it's out of the way. I turn this over and I'm going to bring back the other part of our pocket with our card slots, pen pockets, glasses pocket, whatever you're using them for. And I'm going to put this right side down so as it's right sides together with the pockets, and I'm going to line them up all the way around. So line at the top and sides, and I'm going to clip that in place. There we are. So it's clipped around 3 sides. Now I've left the bottom unclipped because we're going to turn this through the pocket. We're also going to try and turn through the bottom of the bag. So because we're using cork and we've got Decaville on there as well, it could be quite bulky. So the idea is that we pull the whole bag through the bottom of the lining, and then once we've pulled it through, we're going to pull the lining up through the pocket to seal up the bottom of the lining, and then we seal up the bottom of the pocket. Sounds complicated, really isn't. It's really quite simple to do, so don't panic, but it's a really good way of closing up your bag and you can't actually see what's happened. So let's start with this. Now, I haven't clipped the bottom here because what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch across the bottom of the pocket on this side, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. Make sure they're level. I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to iron those in place. If you want, you can mark up 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch to make sure that you're getting it evenly. There, so that's been pressed front and back. So 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. Now, starting in this bottom corner here, I'm going to sew up the side, across the top, back down the other side, making sure that when I stitch, I'm holding these, so I'm stitching these folded up, because that will make it so much easier once we've turned through. It will keep it in its place. I'm actually going to sew this from the other side, so I'm going to turn this over, flip this up and I'm going to sew from this side because it's so much easier to sew this way. So let's turn it upside down. So still starting in this corner, but it's upside down. So 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3mm stitch length. I'm going to sew up this side. I'm going to move this out of the way, stitch across the zip, make sure you stitch across that slowly. I'm going to pivot, move my panel out of the way, make sure my zipper pull is out of the way. I will need to move that as I'm sewing past. And then I'm going to stitch across here, pivot again, move my panel out of the way, and stitch down the other side to the bottom, back stitching really, really well, beginning and end. There we are, I've trimmed up the threads. You can see that's stitched down on both sides. I'm going to take my scissors, just trim this down a little. Make sure you don't cut this outer panel. Just going to trim down that little bit of extra zip. There we are, so zip pocket installed. Obviously at the moment it's open at the bottom. That's okay, we'll close that up later. Next we're going to create the strap tabs. I'm sorry you can't see them fantastically well, we've got sort of white on white here, but we've got 4 pieces. These are pattern piece 7. So this is where my double-sided tape would really come in handy. It still hasn't turned up, however, let me just move my chair. I have found a thicker double-sided tape. Ideally I would use the thinner one, but I don't know where it is. It'll turn up when we've finished. So let's put 3 of these to one side and we'll start with the first one. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the centre point. I'm just going to fold that in half. There we go. I'm just going to make a mark, make it a little bit clearer for you. So my centre point is here. I'll take some double-sided tape. Now my machine is absolutely fine going over double-sided tape, it doesn't mind. Depending on the double-sided tape you have or depending on your machine, it might not like it. If it doesn't like it, you just have to make sure that you don't put your tape anywhere near where you're going to sew and it will be absolutely fine. So let's just, this is a little bit thicker than I would normally use. Put that there. Now, we're not putting it down the centre line, we're putting it off centre. Okay, so again, I've put the second piece on, it's not on the centre line, it's just to the side of it. Let's peel that back. And now I'm going to fold this into the centre. There we are, and fold into the centre. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other 3. There we are, so that's all 4 folded. Now if you find, like on this one, it's not staying closed or you can't find your double-sided tape or you don't have any, you can use some hair grips, bobby pins, just to hold them in place. So it's taped across the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch around all 4 sides using a 3.5mm stitch length, 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge. So I've added my pattern piece 9, which is my ultra firm stabilizer for the outside of my bag. Actually, it's a firm stabilizer, not an ultra firm. So this is Decoville Light. You can use anything similar, just something to give it a little bit of structure. So I've added that already. And now we're going to put on the hidden strap connectors. So we're going to be working in this top section here. which was our original pattern piece 3. You do not have to do the hidden strap connectors. There are instructions in the pattern for adding the tabs at the top next to the zip. If you are a beginner sewist, it's worth giving these a go. The pattern testers who were beginner bag makers said actually they found this easier to sew than they did with the ones that had the tabs next to the zip. So give it a go, give it a try. It'll be much easier, I'm sure. So taking our pattern piece, we're going to turn it over. And we've already found the midpoint, top and bottom. If you haven't found the midpoint, do that now. So just fold it together, take a little snip out of the top, that will find your midpoint for you. Then using the pattern instructions, I'm going to measure down a distance from that point and I'm going to make a mark. So from this mark, I'm going to measure a distance to the left and make a mark, and then from this point I'm going to measure a distance over to the right and make a mark. And again, those measurements are in your pattern instructions. Now I'm going to use these points as my center, and I'm going to do a 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter line across from each one. So half of those would be either 1¼ centimeters or 1/2 inch either side. So now these lines here are for our strap tabs to go through. So we're going to take a craft knife and carefully, very, very carefully, we're going to cut through our outer panel. So taking one of our strap tabs, wrong side up, we're going to push that through the hole. And we're going to pull it through about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. It doesn't have to be exact. I can see that's about 1 inch. Flick it back over. I'm going to stitch a line across the strap tab, okay, above the slit. So I'm not sewing here, I'm sewing here. Okay, so then that will hold this attached to the back. Then let me show you. Okay, so this is still open. We haven't stitched this closed. We've just stitched above where this is. Okay. Again, you see the back. You can still have a space here. This is not stitched down. It's above the slit that we've made. Okay. Taking one of our rectangle rings, we'll put that on. And then I'm going to push this end through the front. It might be a little bit fiddly because it's probably quite tight, that's okay. Let's push that through, leaving a little bit of space for us to stitch. Now you'll see that these are not in the same place. That's okay, because if we have them at the same length, we're going to end up with quite a bit of bulk there. So the fact that this one is longer than this one is absolutely fine, is perfectly correct. Don't trim it down, or I wouldn't trim it down. You can if you want, but it will make it more bulky behind. So I'm going to leave mine at different lengths. Now you have a choice here. I'm going to stitch just here across this open edge, and then I'm going to add some rivets. I might do 1, I might do 2, haven't decided yet. Okay, so we're just going to again stitch across here with a 3mm stitch length, and I'm going to get as close to this as I can, being really careful not to sew over my rectangle ring, and I'm probably going to use a zipper foot to do that. And there we are, that's stitched into place. So now that I've completed this one, I have a choice. I can put some rivets in here, or I can leave it. If you want, you can stitch across here, so pull it out of the way, pull this back, and stitch these two together. That would help to give some extra security. If you wanted, you could also do a second row of decorative stitching, which would mirror what we've done here, so it wouldn't look out of place at all. It does stop them from looking hidden. Obviously, I've done mine in this lilac thread, so as you can see it, I would normally have done this in white, but it's okay, I'm not worried about it. So it is stitched down from the back and the front. That should be strong enough. However, a second row of stitching would help for extra security, or definitely some rivets. Now that we've done this one, I'm going to do the other one, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the back panel. There we are, front and back panels stitched, and then actually for extra security I've added 2 rivets to each of those. Let's prepare the zip. So I want my zip on the left when closed and on the right when open. So exactly the same as my pocket. So I'm going to close it to there. Taking a ruler, I'm using centimetres. You can use a ruler with inches, that's absolutely fine. From this left end, I'm going to measure 4 centimetres, that's 1 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to make a mark. Pull this open here. And where that line is, I'm just going to pinch and fold that back. And by pinching and folding, you'll see that the zip curves around. So pin that in place. There we are. See at the back, we've got a really nice sharp angle there. Do the same on the other side. So where the line is, fold, pinch, hold it up towards the zipper tape. Make sure that's nice and neat, and pin in place. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm just going to baste along this edge here, right on the edge, just to hold that in place as I can take my pins out. There we are, so that's basted in place. A little bit wonky on this side, it doesn't matter, it's just a basting stitch, it's just to hold it down, it's okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pattern piece 8. Now you'll see pattern piece 8 is just a piece of cotton woven. All I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half. Open that out. Ooh. And then I'm going to fold the edges into that center line, and then I'm going to fold in half again. And using my iron, I'm going to press that in place, making sure that these are even. And I'm going to make sure now that my zip from end to end measures exactly the measurement in the pattern instructions. Okay, so you can see I've cut the end off my zip and I've pulled the zipper pull right the way to the end. That way it's much easier to measure. I don't have that bulky bit in the middle. So taking our zip tab, I'm going to place that on the end. Make sure this is nice and straight. If you want, you can burn it with a lighter, but you don't have to. Nice and straight on there. Clip that in place. Now, making sure the front and back are equal. We're going to stitch across the edge here with a 3mm stitch length, and that's going to be 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from this edge. Then when I've done that, I'm going to continue and stitch a box all the way around. Now the box is going to be where the zipper tape is. I'm not going right the way to the end. There we are, so you can see I've stitched around the edge, keeping it in line with the zipper tab, and then I've gone ahead and trimmed off the edges of the zipper tab. So that's our zip prepared. Let's put this bag together. Okay, so to start with, we need the center point, top and bottom of our front panel. Okay, so we're working with the front panel now. Now I've already marked my top and bottom because we did that earlier. So now I'm going to find the midpoint of my zip. Fold it in half, crease it here, and make a little snip. There we go. If you've got the type of zip that frays when you snip into it, then you can absolutely just make a mark with a pen or a pencil or something, just something so you can see it. Now, front panel, right side up, zip, we're going to turn wrong side up. Now I want my zip over to the left when closed and to the right when open. That means my zip is going this way. If you're doing your zip the other way around, obviously you'll need to turn this around. So zip wrong side up, okay, panel right side up, and I'm lining up this top edge here with the center point here, and I'm going to clip that in place all the way along. So you'll notice your zip doesn't come to the ends. That's absolutely fine. That's correct. We don't want them at the ends because we're going to sew across that later. So starting on this left side, I'm going to stitch across with a 3mm stitch length, and it's going to be 1/4 of an inch or 5 or 6mm in from the edge. While I'm stitching, I'm going to make sure that I start and stop at the beginning and end of the zip. I'm not going to stitch all the way to the end, I'm just stitching the zip in place. There we are, so that's stitched in place. Okay, and we're going to take our lining fabric. This is the one without the card slot, so this is the one for the front panel, not the back panel, because obviously when you reach into your bag, you need those card slots to be on the back because it's easier to get to. If you wanted your card slots on the front panel, on the back of the front panel, then you could use the one with the card slots here. It's entirely up to you. Right, so outer panel, right side up, lining panel, right side down. Okay. And again, we're lining up this center point. If you haven't found the center point of your lining panel, do that now. And we're going to line up these center points, same as we did before. And we're going to clip that in place. There we are. Now, like me, you might need to move your zipper pull out of the way. What I would do is pull it all the way out of the way, stitch along, and then pull it back in when you get to the end. Make sure you keep an eye on where this is the whole time that you're sewing. We don't want any accidents. So now I'm not going to stitch from this side. I'm going to turn over and I'm actually going to stitch from the other side because I'm going to use the stitch line that I already have, that we've already done, and I'm going to go over that. That way I know that my zip is in the correct place and I don't have to worry about am I sewing over things because I can't actually see my zipper tape anymore. So I'm going to sew exactly the same place as before, starting and stopping before the ends, okay? So I'm not going right the way to the end. I'm only going as far as this 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch from the end, exactly the same as we did before. There we are, so stitched in place. You can see I've stitched over exactly the same as I did before, okay? So it's starting and stopping at the ends. Now turn this over, close my zip back up. Okay. I'm going to pull down that lining behind. Actually going to put some clips in just to hold it in place. This one. Making sure that's nice and even, pull that down. Okay, clip that. Okay. Now pulling this nice and tight, I'm going to top stitch across this top edge. Sorry, let's turn that around for you. Top stitch across this top edge using a 3.5mm stitch length, 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and making sure that I'm pulling this zipper tape out of the way as I sew, because that will make sure that my outer and lining are nicely pulled together. There we are, let's take my clips off. So you can see that I've stitched, and again, that 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance I've left, I haven't stitched that, okay? So now that we've done that, that's the front panel, outer and lining together. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the back panel. I'm going to do it from this way up. So, front panel, right side up. Back panels are going to be wrong side up. I've got my centre point, and I'm going to match it up with the center point here, okay? So I've got outer panels right side together, lining up at the top and clip in place. There we are, let's turn that over so as we can see our zipper tape. Same as we did before, I'm going to start here, stitch across the top of the zipper tape, moving my zipper pull out the way as I go. 1/4 inch or 5 or 6 millimeters in from the edge. When I've done that, I'm going to take my lining fabric, that's the one with the zip, and place that right sides together, lining up the center points, and then again I'm going to turn over and use the stitch line that I've already made from the other side. Okay. So we'll stitch this one on first, then attach our lining, turn it over and follow the stitching exactly the same as we did on the front panel. Now you'll notice when I top stitched, I didn't top stitch these together, okay? So my top stitching ended here. So my top stitching ended here, okay? Which means my outers and linings are not joined together. And the reason for that is so as I can join together the outers and the linings. So let's flip this. A little bit awkward on camera because it's quite large now. So I've got the two outers right sides together and I've got the two linings right sides together. Okay. Starting in the middle, I'm going to move my zipper pull to the center so as I know it's out of the way and it's not going to cause me any problems while I'm sewing. Okay, so make sure your zip is out of the way. If you want, you can use some sticky tape, stick that down so you know it's not going to fly around or anything. So our outers, we're going to join together. We're going to match up the seams for the outers and we're going to match up the seams for the linings. Okay. And we're going to clip together along the side. Match up these seams here as well. Okay, so we know that they're okay. Remember, we can always adjust. Now I like to clip above the seam and below the seam, so then I know that's not going to move. There we go, that's okay. And clip down, and then I'm going to do the same on this side. I'm also going to clip across the bottom, matching up these seams. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily matter too much if this matches up, but we must match up these seams because then we know that the base of our bag will look pretty and it'll be symmetrical. If we line up here, we could end up with our base of our seams looking a bit like this. Okay, it might only be a small difference, but super important. So clip before, clip after, then we know that they'll stay. So clip down the side, across the bottom, back up the other side, and then on the lining, we're going to do the same. Clip down the side, across the bottom, and back up the other side. Okay, so we're clipped all the way around the side seams. Now I have left at the bottom, just flip this up to make it a little bit easier for you to see. At the bottom, I've left a space and I've got my red stop green go clips. That will remind me that I need to stitch from this corner to here, back stitch really, really well. And then lift my press foot, lift my needle, jump across here to my green go, put my needle back down, back stitch really, really well, and then sew to the end. Then I've got my turning gap. At the end, we're actually going to pull the bag through the turning gap. And then when we've done that, we're going to pull this through our pocket, close it up, and then close the pocket up. That way, our closing seam won't be seen. If you're not confident or you haven't left your space in the pocket because you just want to pull your bag through the main lining, you can do your turning gap here at the bottom, or if you prefer, you could do it at the side. It is a little bit bigger there on that side. So if you wanted to, you could pull your bag through here. Same process. Stop here, back stitch really, really well, jump across, back stitch really, really well, continue sewing. It's entirely up to you. So either from the bottom or the side lining, it's your choice. If you're pulling through the pocket, it's somewhat easier to close up the base of the lining rather than the side. So there's your choices. So now I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew with a 3mm stitch length on the outer and a 2.5mm stitch length on the lining because the fabric there is somewhat thinner, obviously. When I've done that, on my outer only, not on my lining, only on my outer, I'm going to go round, and the same as we did when we were sewing the panels together, I'm going to do a second row of stitching just inside the first one to stop those threads or the seams from pulling. Right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this. This is where I jumped across and left my turning gap. Now, I also forgot to tell you that the reason we're leaving this zip open inside is so we can actually turn through and get to our bag. If you don't leave your zip open, you won't be able to get into your bag. Well, you might be able to, but it will make it incredibly awkward. So do make sure you leave that open. And you can see where I've double stitched all the way around, only on the outer, don't need to do it on the lining, it's absolutely fine. Okay, so starting with the outer, we'll start with the outer because I think it's easier. Boxing corners, so we're going to squeeze this. Because it's cork, it actually is quite easy to do. I've got a little nick out of this one, it doesn't matter. We need to nest the seams, so it's really important that we line up these two seams, not just here, but that we make sure that our seams are lined up at least past our 1 centimetre seam allowance, because otherwise that's when things start to go a little wrong, and when we turn through our seams aren't lined up. So we're not just nesting seams there, we're nesting all the way down. So pull your bag, okay, so as it's opened right out, and then line up, I don't know if you can see, line up your seams all the way down, okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to nest there, and I'm going to clip there, so as I know that's done. Okay. Then I'm going to manoeuvre this around and make sure I can feel right down here that these are still nested. And I'm going to clip here at the sides. 1, 2. Same on this side. So now I'm going to stitch across here with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and the same as we did before, we're going to do 2 rows of stitching because it's the outer fabric and this is quite thick. When I've done this side, I'm going to box this corner in exactly the same way, and then I'm going to stitch across that the same as I have done this side. And when I've finished boxing the outer bottom corners, I'm going to come across to the lining. I'm going to do the same. Now the lining is so much easier, but again, pull, clip, nest those seams. Now with a lighter fabric, you can of course butterfly them open to nest them together if you want to, or you can do like we did before and put them in opposite directions. The one thing you need to watch is that with this one, my seam is going this way. I need to make sure when I box this corner that the seam also goes this way, because otherwise if I go the other way, what I'm going to end up with is a twisted seam at the base, which can be a little bit bulky. So whichever way you decide to go here, you must do the same on the other side. Sewing this corner and this one, then we're going to box the lining corners in exactly the same way, and we're going to sew those as well with a 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Right, it's getting a little awkward to see now because they're getting quite big, but I have checked that this is nested correctly on the outer, which it is, and I've trimmed down by half the edges of those. Then coming over to the lining, you'll see I've trimmed up my threads, but I haven't trimmed down yet. So we'll trim these down by half. This one. Oh, there's that already. Now let's turn this bag through. I don't know how much of this I can get on camera. I will try and do it on camera as best I can. Hopefully you've left your zip open. Let's move my machine out of the way. Maybe we can see a little bit more. Okay, let's try and turn this bag through. So the zip is open. I'm reaching in and I'm going to push down through the center there and try and scrunch everything in. Okay, so once I've done that, then I'm going to try and fold back the lining at the same time as pushing the outer through. I hope that all makes sense. Let's try and... It's a bit of a bundle at the moment. You can see it's a bit like a football. You could probably play football with it. So pull that lining through first. Okay, so now I've got the lining on the outside. Now I need to push this outer through that zip. Now you can pull it through, but be careful. Let's keep going. Push those corners through, the bottom corners. Try and get those pushed through. There we go, it's coming. There we go. Right, now we can reach inside and push that out. Should we push out those corners at the bottom? This is the point we can check. Yeah, that's nested nicely and quite happy with that one. Let's check this side. Should we push out those corners? There we go. Again, that's nested nicely there. So we made sure that we folded all the way down. Just check, yep, that's okay. This one's out a little bit, I'm okay with that. If you're not, you need to turn it back through. Just unpick that little section or from here and just try and readjust it. Actually, I'm okay with that. Now we also need to push out this here. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is we need to close up the bottom of this. So we're going to open our zip pocket. We're going to reach into the bottom and pull this lining up through the pocket. And put that through the pocket as best you can. Pull that out so as you can see that boxed bottom. And we're going to pull there. I'm going to clip in place, or you could pin it in place, entirely up to you, doesn't matter. I'm going to use clip. Okay, now you can probably just about see my stitching from before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this side and I'm just going to stitch right the way across the bottom with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, exactly the same as we did before. And there we are, so you can see I've started here, joined up, sewn all the way across, and ended here where we'd stitched before. Now that I've done that, I can push that back through that pocket to the bottom. I'm not going to show you this very well, but just poke out the corners at the bottom, push that down. Don't know how well you can see, but that's now all sealed up at the bottom. And the next thing we need to do is close the hole in the pocket. So now we're going to pull the pocket out. And if you remember, we have already ironed this and sewn the corners down. So all we need to do is fold that in, which it should fold in fairly easily. Clip in place, some clips. Okay, now I'm going to stitch all the way across the bottom of the pocket, starting at this corner, right the way across, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do a 3mm stitch length, okay, from one side to the other. These edges here, the start and end, are quite bulky, so take your time, go slowly. If necessary, you can hand crank over those if your machine struggles with it, but it should be okay. Okay, so there we go, a little bit of fluff. Let's cut that off. Okay, stitched across the bottom there. Now we're going to put these card slots back in the pockets. You can see, so there's your card slots, and we've got spaces for our pens. Of course, if you did it the other way, you would have a pocket behind here, a whole pocket, and your pocket at the front. Zip up the main outer. That works really, really well. Okay, and we'll just give this another stretch. It's a bit crumpled, it'll be fine. There we go. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to make the handles. So let's do that. So let's make the straps. Making the straps, I've got 2 pieces of cork here. The measurements for this are in the pattern instructions. To make the straps, the first thing you need to do is find the midpoint along the length. Fold that. Then you're going to fold in each edge into the center, and you can use some double-sided tape. Again, like we did earlier, don't put it down the center line, put it just either side, and that will help you to fold those in. When you've done that, you're going to fold it in half, line it up really, really well, and that will be your strap, and then we can just clip in place. For today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. If you need help creating straps like this, I will put a link somewhere on the screen for my video on how to make straps. So that will be there if you need it. For today, I'm actually going to do my straps two-tone. So instead of needing straps this size, I actually only need half the width. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the midpoint all the way along, and I'm going to cut that in half along the length. There we are, so that's cut in half. So now I've got 2 pieces, half the width. Put one over to one side. Same as before, we're going to find the midpoint. Press that down. Alternatively, we know this is 5 centimeters or 2 inches, so we can find the midpoint, which would be 1 inch, or 2.5 centimeters, which for me is here. Mark that at either end. I don't know if you can see that, but I can see it, so that's okay. Doesn't have to be really obvious, it's just a guide to help us. There we are. Now I take my double-sided tape. So I found my thinner double-sided tape, so that's good. Just place that either side of that center. It doesn't have to be perfect. I always tear my double-sided tape rather than cut it, because if you tear it, it's actually easier to peel it back. So as we know, double-sided tape has a tendency to not want to peel. off. I'm going to turn this around. It makes it a little bit easier for me to see. And I'm going to fold this edge in to meet the centre. So that centre line. Actually, it doesn't need to go right on the line. It goes just before it. So then we can join them up. Now be really careful doing this with cork because cork does stretch a little. So be careful not to stretch it too much. It does tend to stretch. And you end up with wobbly bits. I have stretched it a little. There we go, that's okay. Let's do the same on the other side. Okay, so now we've got our lovely 1-inch strap. And you're wondering what we're going to do. So now I'm going to take this. Now this is pre-made bag handle straps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that over the top. Now if you wanted to, you could make another one and just lay them right sides together. I'm using this one because this is what I have. So the white cork is 1 inch and the black cork is a 3/4 inch. So the white one is 2.5 centimeters and the black one is 2 centimeters. That way we get this lovely edging. Now how you want to sew this together is entirely up to you. You could stitch down the sides of the white one. What I would do is I would stitch all the way around including the ends just to make sure. And then add this one on and stitch around again. That will give you a lovely double stitch on the back. Alternatively, you can just stitch a box around the black one or the whatever colour you're using, the smaller one, and that will also still hold it in place absolutely perfectly. So with mine, I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to stitch a box all the way around the edge of the 1-inch strap first with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's probably about 2 millimeters, all the way around a 3.5 millimeter stitch length, and then wrong sides together. Which is the wrong side? This is the wrong side of this one. You can see where it's joined. I'm going to then add the thinner strap, clip that down, and then again I'm going to stitch another box all the way around. Again, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edge of this thinner strap, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. There we go, that's all stitched in place, 2 sides. I've actually completed the other one as well. Now what we need to do is attach these to our bag. So to attach the bag straps, let's put one to one side for the moment. We'll just work with this one. So taking one end, we're going to pass it through our rectangle ring and fold back and clip in place. Now I'm going to pull this through about 1 inch, which is about 2.5 centimeters. Let's check. It's probably a little over. That's okay. I'll clip that in place. Make sure that's lined up nice and neatly. Ooh, that popped off. Now, if you're doing double straps like me, this might become a little bit thick for you to stitch. It may be okay depending on your machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use rivets on mine. I'm just going to put 2 rivets in here. If you're stitching, what you might want to do is stitch down the side here, across the bottom, back up the side and across again. It's entirely up to you. Alternatively, you could do one row of stitching here and another row of stitching here, whichever you prefer. But with the double layered, especially if you're using cork, I would suggest rivets would be a better idea. Clip that. Now we're going to attach this side as well. So we need to make sure that we bring it round and that it's looped like this. Again, we go from the front and up. So you need to make sure that we're not twisted. What we don't want to happen is for this to happen. Now, obviously we're different colours, so it's slightly easier to see, but if your fabrics are the same colour, we don't want it twisted like this. Okay, so from the front up. Again, we're just going to check that we are 2.5 centimetres. Just a little bit too much. 2.5 centimetres is 1 inch. That's about right. And again, get my rivets and make some marks. I'll use my chalk marker. Now, when I make my holes, I might bring them in just a little because I want to avoid these stitches at the side. Because obviously if I make my holes and I go through the stitches, all my stitching is going to come undone. So I will move away from the edges if I need to. Now, just to check, that's quite a way down, but I think that will be okay. Obviously you can, if you want, you can add some end straps. I'm not adding any today, but you could put some end straps on here if you wanted to. Because I'm not going to do that, I'm actually going to burn this with a lighter, and then I'm going to take some of my fabric glue, which I use on all of them, and just roller some on the end there. Or you could use some sort of edge paint if you prefer. Okay, let's make some holes. So I've got my rivet press here. Let me move this out of the way. Oh. Unclip it first. Now, I'm going to go slightly above where I've marked. Okay, make sure it's nice and straight. I'll turn this around a little. Make sure that's lined up nicely. Second one, make sure it's lined up, away from those stitches. Okay. There we are, 2 holes. Oh, didn't want that one escaped, we'll find that later. 1 hole, all the way through to the back. The second one, all the way through to the back. There we are. Get that off. Let's put some end caps on. Now, looking at these now, I probably should have gone with my original marking, but for some reason I didn't trust myself. It will be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. Let's put a whole rivet press in there. It's down. The other one. There we are. 2 marked. Those are on nicely. Now I've got to do this one, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. And there we are. Straps attached, both sides. One finished Audrey.